David sat alone at the back of the large college auditorium. His head was down, eyes tired, heart heavy. Around him, students were laughing, talking, and enjoying the event, but David couldn't hear any of it. His mind was full of noise, memories, of failure, pain, and dreams that never came true. He used to believe in himself. He had big plans once. Maybe start a business, write a book, or do something great with his life. But nothing had worked. Every step forward had ended in disappointment. Every dream had turned into dust. Now, he was just tired. Tired of trying. Tired of pretending. He didn't even plan to come to the event. But his friend forced him, saying, "It's a motivational night. Maybe it'll help." David had no hope, but he came anyway. What could he lose? He had already lost everything inside. The lights dimmed. The host walked onto the stage and welcomed everyone. The audience clapped. But David sat quietly, lost in his thoughts. Then the host said something that made the room silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest for tonight, Denzel Washington." The whole auditorium exploded in cheers. Everyone stood up, shouting and clapping. David's eyes opened wide. "Denzel Washington? Here," he whispered. He looked up. The famous actor and speaker walked onto the stage with a calm smile. He stood tall, confident, full of energy. He wasn't just a star, he was something more. He had presence, like a man who had been through fire, but came out stronger. David sat up straight, curious now. Denzel looked at the crowd. Then he spoke. His voice was deep, powerful, and calm. "You may not know this, but someone in this room is ready to give up." David froze. "You're tired," Denzel continued. "You're hurting. You've failed. And now you think you are not enough." David's heart started beating faster. It felt like the words were meant only for him. "But I'm here to tell you something. You were born with a gift. You were born with purpose. And even if life pushed you down, you are still standing." Denzel paused. His eyes moved across the room, and then stopped. They stopped right on David. For a second, David couldn't breathe. Denzel's eyes looked straight at him. Not at the person next to him, not behind him, right at him. "You," Denzel said slowly, pointing toward the back of the room. "I see you." David's hands shook. "I don't know your story, but I know this. You are not finished. You're not a mistake. You are a fighter, and your story is not over." Tears filled David's eyes. No one had said something like that to him in years. No one had looked at him like that, like he mattered, like he had something inside worth saving. Denzel went on. "Your future is calling you, but it won't come easy. You have to fight for it. You have to believe, even when no one else does, even when you don't believe in yourself." The crowd was silent. Everyone was listening. But David wasn't just listening. He was feeling every word. You may have failed. You may have fallen. But falling is not the end. It's only the beginning, if you choose to stand again. For the first time in months, David felt something inside. Not joy, not strength, but a small, warm spark. Hope. The speech continued. Denzel talked about his own failures, his pain, his doubts, and how he never gave up, how every no he heard only made his yes stronger. David leaned forward, listening closely. Each word felt like medicine for his broken soul. Then Denzel said one last thing before leaving the stage. "If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, don't stop." The crowd stood and clapped loudly. Some people even cried. But David sat still, stunned. His heart was beating hard. His eyes were wide open. His soul felt like it had just woken up from a long, dark sleep. He wasn't sure what had happened, but something had changed. Maybe it was just a speech. Maybe it was just words. But to David, it felt like life had spoken directly to him. And in that moment, sitting at the edge of the stage, in the last row of a crowded room, he felt seen. He felt alive. He felt like maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. David lay in his bed that night, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark, but his mind was wide awake. He couldn't sleep. He didn't even want to. All he could hear were those words. You were born with a gift. You are not finished. Don't stop. Denzel Washington's voice echoed inside his head like a fire alarm in the silence. He had listened to many speeches before, but none had ever hit his heart like this. Why was this different? Why now? David turned on his side. The small clock on the table showed 2:47 a.m. Still, sleep wouldn't come. His heart was full of something strange, something powerful, something painful, something alive. It was hope, but it came with fear. He hadn't felt this way in years. He sat up in bed, took a deep breath, and looked around. The small apartment he lived in felt colder than usual. The paint was old, the curtains thin, and the silence heavy. He had gotten used to this life, a life with no color, no big dreams, just survival. But now, those words burned inside him. He stood up, walked, slowly to a drawer he hadn't opened in a long time. His fingers hesitated before pulling it open. Inside was a dusty notebook with a torn cover. On it, in his own handwriting, were the words, Dream Journal, David James, age 17. He smiled a little. It was weak, but real. He hadn't seen this book in years. He thought he threw it away. But here it was, just waiting. He sat on the floor, opened the notebook, and flipped through the old pages. Each one was filled with dreams, his dreams. Open my own business one day. Become a speaker like Les Brown or Eric Thomas. Help kids from broken homes believe in themselves. Buy mom a small house. Never give up. David laughed softly. What happened to me? He whispered. He had written those dreams when he was full of fire, full of belief, before life had knocked him down, before rejections, failures, and heartbreak had changed him. He kept turning the pages until one stopped him cold. It was a sketch, a drawing he had made of himself on a stage, holding a microphone, speaking to a crowd. At the bottom he had written, One day I'll share my story and change lives. David stared at that drawing for a long time. His eyes began to tear up. Back then, he truly believed in that future. He believed he had something special inside him. He believed he could make a difference. And now, after all these years, a stranger on a stage had reminded him of that same dream. He stood up, notebook in hand, and looked in the mirror. He didn't see a failure this time. He saw someone searching, someone who wanted more, someone who was still alive. He walked to his small desk, opened his laptop, and typed into the search bar. Denzel Washington full speech, college event. He found the full video and pressed play. The sound filled the room, soft at first, then strong. David watched again, but this time with full attention. He noticed things he missed before, the small pauses, the way Denzel's voice changed when he talked about failure, the passion in his eyes. Then came a line David didn't hear during the live event, a line that shook him. Fall forward, because every failed attempt is one step closer to success. Fall forward. That idea hit him like lightning. He had always thought of failure as falling back, as going down. But what if failing was part of moving forward? He paused the video and whispered to himself, Maybe I didn't fall backward. Maybe I was falling forward this whole time. His hands shook as he closed the laptop. He picked up the notebook again and turned to a blank. For the first time in many years, he wrote a new dream, share my story. Inspire one person, just one. That was enough to start. David didn't know how. He didn't know when. But he knew why. He didn't want anyone to feel the way he did, lost, empty, forgotten. He wanted to be the voice that tells someone, "You are not finished." The sun was starting to rise outside the window. Light filled the room. A new day had begun. David looked out, smiled, and said softly to himself, "I don't know what's next, but I'm not quitting." David stood outside the building, heart pounding, hands cold. It was 2:56 p.m. The job interview would start in 4 minutes. He had worn his only formal shirt, clean but a little old. His shoes were polished, but the soles were worn out. He had no tie, but he had hope. And for the first time in a long while, that hope felt heavier than fear. He took a deep breath and walked in. The receptionist greeted him with a smile, asked him to wait, and pointed him toward a chair in the lobby. He sat down, trying to calm his nerves. His fingers tapped his notebook in his bag, his old dream journal. He had brought it along. It made him feel safe, like a piece of his past was walking beside him. He looked around at the others waiting, 2 men in expensive suits, 1 woman with perfect makeup and a stack of certificates in her hand. They looked calm, confident. David felt small again. What if I mess up? What if I sound stupid? What if they laugh inside? The voice of fear crept back in, but then another voice whispered, "Fall forward." He closed his eyes and pictured Denzel again, that look, that voice, that belief. He stood up straighter. The interviewer called his name. "David James?" He walked into the room, took a seat, and the questions began. At first, he stumbled. He forgot the name of a software. He paused too long. His hands shook. But then, something inside him shifted. When they asked, "Tell us about yourself," he didn't talk about his degrees or past jobs. He talked about life. He told them, "I've failed before, but I've learned. I've been broke, broken, and tired. But I never gave up. I'm still here, and I'm ready to prove myself." There was silence in the room. The interviewer looked up from his notes. "That's honest," he said. "Rare. Thank you." David left the building not knowing if he got the job. But something had changed. For the first time, he walked out of a room with his head up. That night, he sat at his desk again. He turned to a new page in his journal. He wrote, "Step 1. Show up. Speak with truth." I did that today. But life wasn't going to stay easy. The next few days were hard, very hard. The job call didn't come. Not on day 1, not on day 2 or 3. David grew restless. He applied to 5 more places, got 2 rejections, no replies from the others. Doubt returned like an old shadow. Was I foolish to believe again? Did I just get carried away by a speech? Am I still just a nobody? He went out for a walk to clear his mind. It was cold outside, windy, harsh. He passed by a bookstore with a big sign. Free? Talk how to build your life from nothing. Tonight, 7 p.m. David looked at the time. 6:42 p.m. Something inside him said, "Go." He stepped in. The room wasn't crowded, maybe 20 people, but the speaker was full of energy. He wasn't famous, but his words had fire. The speaker said, "You don't need a perfect plan, you just need to move. One small step, and then another." David nodded slowly. After the session, he walked up to the man and shook his hand. "That really helped me," he said. The man smiled. You look like someone with a story. David laughed nervously. Maybe. Ever thought of starting a blog or podcast? The man asked. David shook his head. No one would listen. You listened tonight, didn't you? The man said. All it takes is one person. That sentence hit him deep. That night, David didn't sleep. Again. But not from fear, from fire. He opened his laptop and created a free podcast account. It wasn't fancy, just a name, a simple logo, and a microphone on his phone. He called it One More Step with David James, and he recorded his first episode right there at 2:13 a.m., no script. Just heart. He spoke about pain, about failure, about that night in the auditorium, about standing up again. He ended it with one line. Maybe you're lost right now, but if you're still breathing, you're not finished. Take one more step. He uploaded the episode and went to bed. The next morning, he checked the app. People had listened. 2 had subscribed. 1 left a comment. I needed this. Thank you. David sat back, stunned. 1 person. He had touched 1 soul. And that was enough. For now. David stared at his phone. The voice on the other end had just said something unbelievable. We'd like to talk. Crestline Media? A real media company? Was this a joke? He cleared his throat and answered carefully. Sure. I'm listening. The woman, Michelle, spoke gently. Someone on our team heard your podcast. We were moved. It's raw, real. We think your voice, your story, could reach more people. David's heart raced. I only have 1 episode. Michelle laughed softly. Sometimes that's all it takes. She invited him to a meeting, just to talk. Nothing big, just a conversation. She gave him the time and address. David hung up and sat in silence. For a moment, he couldn't move. He had spent so many years in silence, in shadows. And now someone had heard him. His voice mattered. But with the excitement came something darker, fear. What if I'm not ready? What if I mess up? What if they laugh when they meet me in person? He looked at the mirror. The same old face, the same eyes that had seen pain, hunger, loneliness. Could someone like him really be on the edge of something big? Still, he wrote the meeting details down. His hands were shaking. The day of the meeting, he wore the same shirt again, the one he used for the interview. It was clean, not perfect, but he didn't have perfect. On the way there, the city looked different. Not brighter, not happier, just possible. He kept whispering to himself, fall forward. Fall forward. When he arrived at Crestline Media's office, the building was tall, glass everywhere, shiny floors, people in suits. It felt like a different world. At the front desk, he said nervously, I have a meeting with Michelle. The receptionist smiled and called someone. Moments later, a young woman in a blue dress walked over. David James? He nodded. I'm Michelle. So glad you came. They walked into a small meeting room. Coffee was offered. David declined. His stomach was too tight. Michelle smiled kindly. Your voice is special. You don't fake anything. That's rare, David said softly. I just speak what I feel. She leaned forward. That's exactly why we want to help. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep going. We'd like to support your podcast. Maybe help you. Grow it, David blinked. Support how? Better audio, a small studio space. Help with editing. You keep the message. We just help you shape it. It sounded like a dream. Too good. Maybe too good. He smiled. Thanked her. Said he needed a little time to think. She agreed. That night back in his apartment, David sat quietly. He should have been jumping with joy. But instead, a deep fear began to grow inside him. You're not good enough. You're just lucky. They'll find out you're a fraud. Old voices. Old wounds. They came back like ghosts. He turned. On his podcast app. Opened the comment section. There it was. A new comment. But this one wasn't kind. Fake deep. You talk like you've figured life out, but you sound lost. Stop pretending. David's hand froze. One comment, just one. But it cut deeper than a knife. All the fire he had, it started to fade. The doubt takes over. The next morning, he didn't record anything. The day after that, still nothing. 3 days passed, then 4. He didn't check his app, didn't open his notebook, didn't answer Michelle's email. He sat on the floor one night holding the journal with his teenage dreams. He whispered, maybe this was stupid. Maybe I should just disappear again. Tears filled his eyes. All that hope. Was it just a trick? He looked around his apartment. The silence felt heavier now, like failure was sitting next to him, whispering lies in his ear. A voice from the past. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You don't know me, but your podcast saved me last week. I was going to give up, but you said if you're still breathing, you're not finished. Thank you. Please don't stop. David stared at the screen. His eyes filled again, but this time not with pain, with something else. Purpose. He whispered. They listened. Even when I was quiet, they were still listening. He stands again. David stood up, wiped his face. He didn't feel strong, but he felt ready. He sat at his desk, turned on his mic, and started talking. This time, his voice cracked. He didn't hide it. He said, I almost quit this week. One mean comment broke me, but one kind one saved me. Life is like that. Pain and hope, together. He paused. I'm not perfect, but I'm here. And I won't stop. Not yet. He uploaded the episode and sent Michelle an email. I'm in. Let's do this. Thank you for believing in me. David sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the message on his phone. Mom, heard your voice. I'm proud of you. Call me when you can. He hadn't spoken to his mother in months, not since she had collapsed, not since the hospital. The truth was, he hadn't forgiven himself. When she got sick, he had no job, no money, no strength. He couldn't be the son he wanted to be. The guilt had eaten him alive. Even when she got better, he kept his distance. He thought she needed peace. He didn't think he could give her that. But now, she had heard his voice. On a podcast, on the internet. She was listening. She had been watching quietly while he tried to rebuild. He read her message again, slowly. I'm proud of you. His hands shook. David took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, he called her. The phone rang once, twice. Then, hello? Her voice. Tired, soft, but familiar. Mom, he whispered. She paused. David? He couldn't speak. His throat locked. I'm sorry, he said. For everything. For not calling. For not being there. There was silence. Then her voice cracked. I was never angry, David. I was just waiting. I knew you'd come back when you were ready. He covered his mouth with his hand, tears running down his face. She continued. I heard your voice last week. You sound strong. You sound alive again. I'm trying, he said. I know, baby, she replied. And I'm here. Always. They didn't talk long, just 15 minutes, but it felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. When he ended the call, something felt lighter inside him. Maybe, just maybe, the past was not his prison anymore. Maybe it was just part of his story. A message from the streets, the next day, David walked to a small coffee shop near his apartment. It had become his quiet place, where he wrote, Planned, recorded. As he sipped his drink, someone tapped his shoulder. He turned around. It was Marcus, his childhood friend. But life had taken Marcus down a harder road. The last time David saw him, Marcus was strung out, angry, and homeless. Now he looked tired, thinner, eyes sunken. "David?" Marcus said. David stood slowly. "Marcus? I heard you, man. Someone played your podcast on a speaker at the shelter. I was sitting in the back." David blinked. "Really? You said something about falling forward. That hit me. I'm trying, man." David felt a lump in his throat. He didn't expect this. "Sit with me," David said. They talked for nearly an hour about old memories, about hard times, about choices. Marcus admitted he was still struggling, still using sometimes, still afraid, but he wanted out. "I don't have answers," David said honestly. "But if you want someone to walk with you, I'm here." Marcus nodded, eyes wet. "Thank you, man. Nobody's said that to me in a long time. Opportunity grows, and so does pressure." Later that week, Michelle from Crestline Media called again. "David," she said, excited, "we have a huge opportunity. A big show wants to feature you. Just 10 minutes. But it could open every door." David felt his stomach twist. "Me? On that show?" "Yes. You'd speak about your story, how you came back." David looked down at his notebook. He had written those words once. "One day, I'll tell my story to the world." That day had come. But fear returned. He wasn't perfect yet. What if he wasn't good enough? Michelle sensed the silence. "You don't have to say yes right now, but think about it. This could change everything." The ghost of failure. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept remembering the worst moments. Sleeping on benches. Missing meals. Rejections. Shame. The podcast was still small. What if this was too fast? He opened his email. A new message. No name. Just this. "You sound like you're lying. No one changes that fast. Just wait. They'll see the real you." David stared. At it, old fears returned. "They're right. You're fake. You'll fail again." He nearly deleted everything. But then he opened a message from a young woman named Lily. She had written this. "Your story saved me from ending my life. You said, even the broken can shine." I cried. Then I stood up. I'm still here. Because of you. David dropped his phone and covered his face. The fire inside him flickered. But it hadn't died. Not yet. David stood outside the studio. His hands were cold. His throat was dry. The building looked modern. Clean glass, silver doors, polished lights. It didn't feel like his world. Inside, people walked quickly, confident, busy, like they belonged. David felt like an outsider. But he was here. Michelle had texted him that morning. "You're not alone. Just be real. That's your power." He had almost backed out again. Almost. But then he remembered Lily's message. He remembered Marcus. He remembered the girl who said his voice saved her. Life. This wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. Still, the fear was real. What if he froze on stage? What if his voice cracked? What if they laughed? He had no script, just his story. That terrified him, but he also knew it was time. Backstage. He walked inside. A young assistant greeted him. "David James? Right this way." She smiled kindly, but David still felt like he didn't belong. They led him down a hallway. Lights buzzed above. His shoes clicked on the smooth floor. The room backstage was quiet. A bottle of water waited, a mirror, a microphone clipped to his shirt. 10 minutes, someone said. Just be yourself. He nodded, heart pounding. He looked at his reflection. Same face, same eyes. But something inside had changed. He whispered to the mirror, "Fall forward, even if you're scared." The assistant returned. "They're ready." The stage. He stepped out. Bright lights hit his face. Cameras pointed at him. A crowd sat silently, waiting. A large screen behind him read, "One voice can change a life." David took the mic. The room felt too quiet. He took a shaky breath and began. "I didn't grow up dreaming about standing on a stage like this. I didn't think I mattered enough." Some people nodded gently. He continued. 2 years ago, I slept under a bridge. I had no job, no home. I had nothing left, not even hope." A woman in the crowd covered her mouth, eyes wide. David's voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "One night, I recorded my voice on a broken phone. I talked about pain, about failing, about wanting to give up." He paused. "I posted it, not because I thought anyone would listen, but because I needed to hear myself speak again." Someone in the audience wiped a tear. That little recording reached one person, then another, then another. He looked at the crowd. His voice grew stronger. "People I never met wrote to me. They said my voice helped them stand up, helped them stay." He took a step forward. "And now I'm here, not because I'm special, not because I have the answers, but because I kept going." He looked down for a second, then up again. "You don't have to be perfect to matter. You don't need a fancy background to make noise. You just need courage to speak, even when your voice shakes." The crowd was silent, listening, feeling. "If you're breathing, you're not finished." His final words echoed through the room. The silence. After the storm, he walked off stage, not knowing what would happen next. No clapping, no shouting, just silence. David sat backstage, heart pounding. Had he failed? Then, footsteps. Michelle appeared, tears in her eyes. "They want you back," she whispered. He blinked. "What?" "They just asked for a second segment, same topic, more time. They loved you." He couldn't speak. He just closed his eyes and breathed deeply. This was real, unexpected. Visitor, as he stepped outside later that day, a voice called out, "David!" He turned. A woman stood there, maybe in her 40s, worn jacket, eyes full of pain. I know you don't know me, but I'm from the shelter downtown. We all heard your podcast last week." He nodded, unsure what to say. She took a step closer. "I lost my son. Last year. He gave up. But when I heard you say, 'Your pain is not your end,' I felt like I could breathe again." David reached out and took her hand gently. No words were needed. He saw her pain, and she felt his heart. The studio lights were brighter than anything David had ever seen. He stood alone on a stage 10 times bigger than the last one. This was no podcast. This wasn't just a guest talk. This was his own show. He had been offered a contract just 1 week ago. A major TV network had seen his speech online. Millions of people watched it. Thousands had commented, shared, cried. They wanted him to speak every week. A show about real pain, real healing, and real people, they said. David had accepted. But now, as he stood on the stage, the fear returned. What if I mess up? What if I freeze? I'm just a guy who failed. What do I know? His hands trembled. He looked down at the floor. His old sneakers, still scuffed, still worn, no fancy shoes, no perfect smile, just him, and the voice inside said, "You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be real." First recording, the world is watching. 5 seconds, the producer called. David closed his eyes, breathed in and out. 3, 2, 1, and we're live. The red light blinked. David looked into the camera. "Welcome," he said softly. "My name is David James, and I've been broken." He paused. "This show isn't about success. It's about struggle. It's about pain. And how we stand back up." The studio was silent. People behind the cameras stopped moving. "Today, I want to talk about the nights that nearly destroyed me, and how, even in darkness, I found one reason to keep breathing." For 10 minutes, he spoke like he was speaking. To one person, someone hurting, someone lost. He talked about falling. He talked about guilt. He talked about the night he almost gave up. "But you know what?" he said in the final seconds. "If you're still here, you're stronger than you think." And the screen faded to black. The reaction, David walked off stage, shaking. He had no idea if it was good. The room was quiet. Then, the producer walked over. A woman with sharp glasses and no expression. She looked him in the eye, paused, then said, "That was the most honest thing I've heard on this stage in years." David felt like collapsing. Fame begins. But so do the shadows over the next 2 weeks. David's face was everywhere. The voice of the broken. The man who fell, then rose. David James, from homeless to hope. His inbox overflowed. Offers, invites, endorsements. Everyone wanted a piece of his story. But it wasn't all good. Some people mocked him online. "This guy's just another sad story trying to make money. He's faking the pain for fame." Others doubted him. "Bet he's lying about the past." Some even tried to dig up his history, searching for dirt. David read every comment, even when he told himself not to. The spotlight that once felt warm was now starting to burn. Losing his voice one night. As he prepared to record the second episode, he stared at the script in front of him. A team had written it, polished, perfect, safe. He read the lines. They didn't sound like him. What if I just read it? He asked himself. What if I stop being me? The producers were happy with the script. They wanted him to stick to the plan, but David didn't feel right. His story wasn't polished. His pain wasn't clean. He stood up, walked outside, and sat on the steps in the dark. A surprise visit from Marcus. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Yo, David!" He looked up. It was Marcus. But this time, Marcus looked healthier. He had cut his hair. His clothes were cleaner. His eyes brighter, David stood. "Marcus?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah, I got into a recovery program, man. I'm trying." David stepped forward and hugged him tight. Marcus pulled back. "Your show? That first episode? I watched it in the center with a bunch of guys, grown men crying." David smiled faintly. "I'm glad." Marcus's face turned serious. "But don't lose yourself, man. Don't let them turn your truth into a product." David blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, don't stop speaking like the guy who saved me. Speak like you, not like them." David nodded slowly. He understood. David stood in the middle of the empty stage. No cameras yet, no audience, just silence. He had asked for 1 hour alone in the studio. He needed to remember why he started. The lights were still off. The chairs were empty. But in his mind, he could see the faces. The girl who almost gave up. The old man who cried alone in his car. The young boy who said, "You made me feel strong." David whispered to himself, "This is for them." He didn't want to be famous. He didn't want to be rich. He just wanted one thing: to make someone feel less alone. Recording day, a risky move. "Ready, David?" the producer asked. He nodded. But today would be different. No script, no makeup, no fancy speech. Just one man, one mic, and the truth. The red light blinked. They were live. David looked into the camera. He didn't smile. He didn't fake energy. He just stared for a moment. Quiet. Then he said, "I'm not here to impress you. I'm not here to be a hero." He paused. "I'm here because I almost didn't make it. I was the guy people gave up on, the one who failed too many times, the one who believed he was nothing. But then, one stranger said, "You matter," and that changed everything. He spoke, like the broken David told the story of his darkest night, the night he sat under a bridge with a bottle in one hand and a goodbye letter in the other. He spoke softly. Tears filled his eyes, but he kept going. I wanted the pain to stop, not just the hunger or the cold, but the silence inside me. But then I heard a voice on an old radio. It was a preacher, maybe, or a teacher. I don't even remember his name. He said 5 words. "You're still here. Fight on." And somehow, that was enough to make me breathe again. The room was still. No one moved, not even the cameramen, the shift. "I'm not a perfect man," David said. "I still feel fear. I still have bad days. But now I know that being broken doesn't mean I'm useless. It means I've survived. And maybe, just maybe, my cracks let some light through." His voice shook, but he kept speaking for 30 full minutes, with no cuts, no edits, no mask, just truth. The world responds. The episode went live that night. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have music or edits or effects. But something happened. It exploded. Millions of views in hours. People shared it like wildfire. Comments flooded in from all around the world. I cried. I needed this more than anything. He spoke exactly how I feel inside. I was about to give up tonight. I won't now. Hospitals played the episode in waiting rooms. Schools showed it in classrooms. Even prisons requested it for inmates. One letter that changed everything. A week later, David received a letter in the mail. No email, no phone number, just ink and paper. It read, "Dear David, I don't have a TV. I don't have a phone. But I watched your episode from the back window of a soup kitchen. I was planning to end my life that night, but your voice made me wait one more day, and then another. I'm still here. Thank you for being real. You saved me." M. David held the letter to his chest, closed his eyes, and cried. The legacy begins after that. Everything changed. David's show was no longer just a program. It became a movement. Volunteers created shelters under his name. Counselors used his clips in therapy sessions. People all over the world made their own voice notes, their own fall forward messages, and they tagged him. Fall Forward Movement. David didn't want fame, but now he had something far better: impact.